Christian, you're fired.
It's fine.
Hopefully, shut up.
You will never see me again. You are the most
good bitch. Shut
ever met in my life.
you up. Then you
Courtney.
you too. Get the out of here.
She had 2 million followers. He had a secret recording. Tonight, only one of them is alive to tell their side. In a luxury high-rise overlooking Miami's skyline, a relationship that started online and was funded almost entirely by it, ended with a single knife wound to the chest. She says it was self-defense. His family says it was murder. And 4 years later, the truth is still locked behind a courtroom door that hasn't fully opened yet. This is the story of Courtney Clenney and Christian Obumseli, the OnlyFans model, the boyfriend she's accused of killing, and the mountain of evidence both sides are fighting over right now in real time as this case heads toward trial. Before we go further, if you're new here, welcome to Global Crime Facts. We dig into the cases everyone's talking about and the ones nobody's covering yet. Real evidence, real court documents, no fluff. If that's your kind of channel, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because this case is far from over, and we'll be the ones breaking it down when the verdict finally comes. Now let's go back to where it all started. Not with the stabbing, not even with the relationship, but with who Courtney Clenney was before any of this happened, and how a girl from Texas ended up at the center of one of the most talked about murder trials in the country. To understand how this case ended in a courtroom, you have to understand how it began. And it didn't begin with cameras or condos. It began with 2 people, each carrying their own kind of vulnerability, who found each other at exactly the wrong moment. Courtney Clenney grew up in Texas, and from early on she wanted to be seen. She built that into a career modeling content that grew her Instagram following into the millions, and an OnlyFans page that turned that following into real money. By her mid-20s, she wasn't just internet famous. She was financially independent in a way most people her age never get close to, but her record wasn't spotless. In 2020, she was arrested for a DUI in Texas after police found her asleep behind the wheel, having crashed into another vehicle. It was a warning sign that, at the time, nobody outside her circle was paying attention to. That same year, across the country, Christian Obumseli was rebuilding his life in Miami. He'd moved into the cryptocurrency industry, chasing the kind of opportunity that drew a lot of young men to that world in 2020. Then the pandemic hit, and he lost his job. He was, by most accounts, financially exposed at exactly the moment he met Courtney Clenney in November of that year. What followed was fast, and by prosecutors' own later description, it was anything but stable. The Miami-Dade state attorney would eventually call it a tempestuous, combative relationship. And that characterization would come to matter a great deal, because almost everything prosecutors and defense attorneys argue about today traces back to what actually happened between these 2 people behind closed doors. By January 2022, the relationship had moved into its most visible phase. Courtney and Christian were living together in a condo at One Paraíso, one of Miami's luxury high-rises, $10,000 a month, funded almost entirely by her online income. From the outside, it looked like success. 2 attractive young people, a 6-figure lifestyle, a view of the bay. But the people closest to them were already starting to worry. Friends and family on both sides would later describe a relationship defined by extremes, intense highs, followed by conflicts that escalated faster than anyone around them expected. Nobody knew yet how far those conflicts would go. Nobody knew that within months, police would be standing in that same apartment, and one of these 2 people would no longer be alive. What happened next wasn't sudden. There were warning signs, and one of them was caught on camera. February 2022, Aspen, Colorado. A getaway that was supposed to look like the life Courtney and Christian had built for themselves, except someone was filming, and what they captured would later become one of the most scrutinized pieces of evidence in the entire case. In the video, Courtney is seen striking Christian again and again while shouting at him. She blames him for her drinking. She tells him he's fired like he's an employee, not a partner. She accuses him of costing her money, of flirting with other women, and she screams at him to leave. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't raise his voice to match hers. He just stands there absorbing it while a stranger's camera keeps rolling. That footage would sit largely unknown to the public for months, but to prosecutors, it would later become something much bigger than a bad night in a ski town. It would become evidence of a pattern. A pattern they'd argue stretched back to the very beginning of the relationship, and one they'd fight in court for the right to show a jury in full. Because here's what makes this case so difficult to pin down. Nobody disputes that the relationship was volatile. Not the prosecution, not the defense, not even Courtney Clenney herself. The disagreement isn't about whether there was conflict. It's about who was the aggressor and who, if anyone, had reason to be afraid. Defense attorneys would later argue that the relationship was mutually volatile, that Christian had his own moments of aggression, his own contribution to the chaos, and that by April 2022, it was Courtney who had reason to fear him, not the other way around. Prosecutors would argue the opposite, that the Aspen video and others like it showed a consistent dynamic, one person controlling, striking, and berating the other, escalating over time. 2 months after that trip, the relationship would end in the worst way possible. But before we get there, it's worth sitting with this video for a moment, because it raises the question this entire case still hasn't answered. If this was the pattern, if this was what their relationship looked like when a camera happened to be running, then what did it look like on April 3rd, 2022, when no camera was rolling at all? When the only two people in that apartment were Courtney Clenney and Christian Obumseli, and only one of them would walk out alive. That's where we go next. April 3rd, 2022. Around 5 p.m., police arrived at the One Paraiso condo in Miami, responding to a call about an aggravated battery. According to the police report, heavily redacted, but later made public in pieces, officers were met by a front desk supervisor, who escorted them up to the apartment Courtney and Christian shared. Inside, they found Christian Obumseli with a single stab wound to his torso. A medical examiner would later determine the wound was 3 inches deep, deep enough to reach his heart. He didn't survive. In the immediate aftermath, investigators treated it as a case of self-defense. Courtney told them, according to reports, that she had thrown a knife during a confrontation and that it struck him. One throw, one wound, a tragic accident born out of a fight that had gone too far. That was the story, at least at first. But Christian's family wasn't satisfied. They pushed back almost immediately, telling investigators that the story didn't add up, and that the relationship Courtney described wasn't the one Christian had lived through. Under that pressure, the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office reopened its inquiry, and what they found over the following months started to complicate the simple narrative of a knife thrown in self-defense. In the meantime, Courtney Clenney left Florida. She surfaced months later in Hawaii, where her attorney would later say she had been receiving treatment for substance abuse and for post-traumatic stress, which her team attributed to the relationship itself. It was there in August 2022, 4 months after Christian's death, that she was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. By then, the case had already split into 2 competing stories that still haven't been resolved. Prosecutors argue this wasn't a single desperate act. It was the final chapter of a pattern, the same pattern caught on camera in Aspen, escalating until it ended in Christian's death. The defense argues the opposite, that Courtney was the one living in fear, that she acted to protect herself in a moment of genuine danger, and that the relationship's volatility cut both ways. Since her arrest, Courtney Clenney has been held without bond. No judge has agreed to release her, despite multiple attempts by her defense team. And for nearly 4 years now, this case has remained exactly where it was on the day she was charged, unresolved, unproven, waiting for a jury that still hasn't been picked. Because here's the part most people don't realize. This case hasn't gone to trial. Not yet. Every claim you've heard from either side is still just that, a claim. And what happens next in a Miami courtroom sometime this summer is what will finally decide which version of this story the law believes.